Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Somebody give me a thumbs up or something.
Yep.
Okay, just you can hear me. I want to thank all of you for coming in tonight. Ms. Carmichael is so graciously is doing this meeting for us, and she is so informative. And I always send people to her for the questions that I can't answer. So I'm going to just go ahead and give it over to her, and I think she's going to do a Q&A at the end. So just call me tomorrow if you have any questions.
All right, thank you so much for having me this evening. If you'll be patient with me, we still have people entering the room and I want to get them all admitted. That's good news. And as Ms. Waldron mentioned, my name is Ann Carmichael and I'm a student financial aid consultant. I've been doing this for about 20 years and I don't know all the answers to all of the questions, but if I can't answer your specific question, I will find somebody who can. Now, just a couple of housekeeping tips before we get started. Just to avoid distractions, go ahead and make sure that your Zoom video is off and that your audio is muted throughout the presentation. You can use the chat box in Zoom to ask any questions as I move through the presentation, and I'll be happy to address those afterwards. Now, as I'm sure your counselor has told you, the Louisiana Department of Education has asked again this year that you submit the free application for federal student aid as a requirement for graduation. And this simply ensures that your money is ready and waiting for you when you begin college, hopefully in the fall. For those who wait until the last minute, it can be a tedious process, and if you don't get your financial aid completed, classes can be dropped. It just really is best to get it done as soon as you can. And because college can be expensive, you need to make sure that you're aware of and you start preparing for those costs, which include your equipment, books and supplies, so your notebooks, your textbooks, a computer if you need one. Your personal expenses like your phone bill or your laundry expense if you're living on campus, your fuel for your car getting back and forth to classes, and your food purchases outside of your meal plan, your room and board, which can include your dorm, or if you're living off campus in an apartment, that might include electricity, water and gas, your groceries, and then tuition and fees like your parking, library, technology and athletic fees, and campus transportation. But the good news is that there is financial aid available from the federal government, from our state government, your college or career school, and nonprofit and private organizations. Now, every year, the federal government provides more than $120 billion in student financial aid. And surprisingly, a lot of that goes unawarded. We just all want to make sure that your portion is there, ready and waiting for you. Types of federal student aid include the federal Pell Grant, the federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, federal work study, and then direct subsidized, unsubsidized, and PLUS loans. Federal student aid grants are a form of financial aid that does not have to be repaid. And they include Pell Grants for undergraduates with financial need, FSEOGs for undergraduates with exceptional financial need, service grants for students of military parents who died defending the country after 9/11, and teach grants for students pursuing a teaching career. The Federal Work Study Program provides part-time jobs to help students pay for their education expenses. So when you tell the financial aid office that you're interested in federal work study, you're going to be considered for this program. And it's important to note that this is a FAFSA question. You're asked if you're interested. You can answer yes, no, or I'm not sure. So we encourage all students to say yes, you're interested, because number one, you're not obligated to accept any jobs that you're offered through the financial aid office, but you will be prompted to consider them. This federal work study jobs also look great on your resume. So when you're building your professional resume when you graduate, you'll have something of substance to add to that. And the monies will be paid directly to you and can be used to pay your miscellaneous expenses. Now, direct subsidized loans are based on financial need, and no interest is charged on this type of loan until you graduate or cease to attend. Almost everyone is eligible for the unsubsidized loans, but with those loans, you are going to be responsible for the interest throughout your college career and then throughout your repayment period. So you can see that there's a big difference between the direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans. You always want to accept the subsidized loans first. And you can remember this when you receive your award letter by telling yourself that the U in unsubsidized means that you always pay the interest. So always accept that subsidized portion first. If you are offered student loans, you'll want to accept the federal student loans first because payments aren't due on this type of loan until you graduate or cease to attend. The interest rate is fixed and at a lower rate, and no credit check is required. And remember, this type of student loan is in the student's name. Private loans should be accepted only as needed because most require payments be made while you're still in school. The interest rate might be variable and often it's much higher, and they almost always require a cosigner. So you're going to a family member or someone that has credit established already, and you're asking them to become part of your loan. So you want to be very cautious about this. You also want to make sure that you're doing your research before selecting a private loan lender because rates and incentives to borrow on this type of loan are going to vary. So to dispel the myth, almost everyone is eligible for some type of federal student aid. Now, all federal student aid and most institutional and private aid is contingent upon completion of the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA. And it launched on October 1st, as I'm sure you're aware, and it opens every October 1st. So remember, you have to apply for federal student aid and complete your FAFSA every year that you're going to be in college. Student financial aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis. So get to the head of the line and complete your FAFSA as soon as possible. You'll want to remember to pay close attention to all the deadlines. There are going to be college deadlines. There are going to be state deadlines for your TOPS scholarship. There are federal deadlines, and I'm sure that your counselor has asked you to have your FAFSA completed by a certain deadline to meet your graduation requirement. Now, begin the FAFSA process by collecting all of the documents needed to complete the form. And these include the student and parents' social security cards, because the FAFSA must reflect the names and numbers exactly as printed on your most recent card. Your 2019 federal income tax returns, if you filed, this will include the parents' and the students' returns. because to transfer your information from the IRS into the FAFSA, you're going to need to enter your name, address, and personal information exactly as it's printed on this return. Have your W-2s in front of you, because sometimes there will be information asked for in the FAFSA that is not reflected on your tax return. And then your bank statements and records of investments, because you have to report the balances of these accounts as of the date you submit your FAFSA. You'll want to begin this process by creating the Federal Student Aid ID, or FSA ID, because it allows students and parents to identify themselves electronically when accessing federal student aid websites, such as the FAFSA. The FSA ID consists of a unique username and password that's created by you, and it should reflect only your personal information. Each student and one parent should create an ID by visiting fsaid.ed.gov. Now, remember, only your personal email address, and I'm going to stress that, don't use your school email address, because once you graduate, that email address is going to be disabled and federal student aid will not have any way to get in contact with you. And then only enter your personal phone number, your mobile phone number. If you don't have a mobile phone number, that's fine. You can leave that field blank, but don't use anyone else's. And you're going to be asked for an alternate number. Don't use someone else's number like mom or dad's mobile phone number as your alternate. If you don't have a landline, then leave that alternate phone number blank. Now, your FSA ID username and password is your official electronic signature, and it's legally binding. So make sure you're recording it and keeping it in a safe place, because you're going to use it every year that you complete your FAFSA. If you don't have access to a desktop computer, you can download the FAFSA mobile app. It's called My Student Aid, and you can use it to submit your FAFSA on your mobile phone or any other device with internet access. Or if you prefer, you can complete the FAFSA using the web-based version at fafsa.gov. And it's important to note that you can go from your mobile device, then you can log in from the web-based version. You can go back and forth. So it's always a good idea to download the mobile device. Okay, you want to begin your FAFSA by logging in with the student's FSA ID, because the FAFSA is the student's application for federal student aid. The parent FSA ID is going to be used if you choose to transfer your tax information into the FAFSA, and then it will be used again to sign the student's FAFSA. The high school class of 2021 should be completing the 2021-2022 FAFSA, because that's the academic year that you're applying for financial aid. You can see that you have an option to start the 2020-2021 FAFSA, but that would tell federal student aid that you're seeking financial aid this academic year. There are 8 sections that need to be completed before submitting the FAFSA. The student demographics, where you'll be asked to provide your social security number, name, birth date, personal email address, physical address, residency status, and your gender. Then the school selection section, where you'll report the name of your high school, the colleges that you would like your FAFSA data to be sent to, and your housing plans on each of those campuses. Then the dependency status section, where you will be asked to consider 10 questions that will determine whether you're a dependent or independent student. The number of dependents living in the student's household, and the parent's education. And sometimes parents question why they are being asked to provide their education level, but it's important to note that there can be additional financial aid available on college campuses for first-generation students. You're going to move into the parent demographic section, where parents will be asked to provide their social security numbers, their marital status, and their email addresses. And then the parent financials, where parents will report their working wages from 2019, their federal benefits received, and savings and investment balances. Now, you'll move on into the student financials, and it's important to note that this section looks exactly like the parent financial section. So sometimes parents begin to enter their financials again, so it's looking like the students are making just as much as their parents. But always look up on the top left-hand side. There's a blue ribbon that runs across that will either say student information or parent information. Please refer to that before you begin each section. Then it's time to sign and submit, and this is where you're going to use your FSA IDs. And then you'll want to review the confirmation page. Now, as you're moving through the FAFSA, if you want a little more detail about the question that's being asked, you can check on the question mark to the right of each question that's in the dark blue box. And this will explain exactly what's expected of you. Now for this section, I'm going to cover only the most commonly asked FAFSA questions, but if you have one that I don't address, you can drop it in the Zoom chat box, and I'll answer it at the end of the presentation. Or if you prefer, you can email me and I'll respond to you individually, and I'll provide my email address again afterwards. Let's talk about the citizenship requirement. A student must be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen to complete a FAFSA. But if that student's parents are neither citizens nor eligible non-citizens, the student can still submit their FAFSA. They will enter zeros any place a parent's social security number is asked for. Now, because the parents will not have an FSA ID without a social security number, the parents will want to print a signature page, sign it, and then mail it in directly to federal student aid. Young men between the ages of 18 and 26 must register with Selective Service to be eligible for any federal benefits. And because grants, work study, and student loans are administered by federal student aid, these are federal benefits. So you need to be registered unless you plan to pay out of pocket for your education. If you haven't already registered with Selective Service and you'd like to, you can do that within the FAFSA. Even if you're not 18 yet, if you ask federal student aid to register you for Selective Service, they will do so on the date you turn 18. Only colleges that you list on the FAFSA are going to consider you for federal student aid. So make sure that you're adding all the schools that you're considering. You can add up to 10 at a time. And if you are planning to apply to more than 10 colleges, you can follow the instructions listed in this section to do so. So these are the 10 questions that are going to determine whether you are going to have to provide parental information or not. Now remember, they're asking the students these questions, and I'll quickly go over them. Will you be 24 or older by January 1st of the school year for which you're applying for aid? Are you married or separated but not divorced? Will you be working on a graduate degree? Do you have children who provide more than half of their support from you? Do you have dependents other than children or a spouse who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training? So that means other than boot camp or basic training. Are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? At any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care, or were you a ward or dependent of the court? Are you an emancipated minor, or are you in legal guardianship as determined by a court? Are you an unaccompanied youth who is homeless? Or are you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? So if you can answer yes to just one of these questions and you can provide a legal document supporting your claim, you're considered an independent student. All others are dependent and must provide parental information. For FAFSA purposes, unfortunately, just because you file your own taxes or say you live alone and support yourself, you are still considered an independent student unless you can answer yes to one of the questions. One of the most commonly asked questions is, who do I report as the parent on my FAFSA? The parent or parents that you lived with the longest in the past 12 months should be listed on your FAFSA. So if you live with both of your biological parents, that's easy. You're just going to list both of them. But if the parent you lived with the longest in the past 12 months is separated, divorced, or was never married, you should list only that parent. However, if that parent is remarried, you now need to include his or her spouse. So list your step parent if your parent is remarried. In other words, federal student aid wants to know the financial standing of the household that the student has lived in the longest in the 12 months prior to the date that the FAFSA was submitted. If you are identified as a dependent student, but your parents will not provide their information on your FAFSA, just simply state that you're unable to provide information about your parents. Answer no to the special circumstance question and submit your FAFSA. However, you want to contact the financial aid office to discuss your situation, because if you don't, they're going to only offer you student loans. So make sure that you are contacting them and letting them know about your situation, and they can help you through the process. Now, to expedite the processing of your federal student aid, you really should try to use the IRS data retrieval tool if you filed a tax return in 2019. Now, if you didn't file a return in 2019, you will manually enter your information in the income section. But using the IRS data retrieval tool is going to greatly diminish your chances of being selected for verification, which means the financial aid office is not going to have to ask you to request a tax transcript from the IRS showing that you did indeed file a tax return and what those actual amounts are. They're not going to take it at your word if you manually enter your income here. If you have trouble through this process, you can call Federal Student Aid or Leela's FAFSA helpline, and we have some tips to help make that process easier. But if you do choose to use the tool, you'll go directly to the irs.gov site, and this is where you want to grab your 2019 tax return and enter your information exactly as it's printed. Now, we've had situations where your tax preparer may have misspelled your name. They may have stated that you live on Jones Street instead of Jones Avenue. You need to enter exactly what's on the face of that tax return, because that's how the IRS is going to identify you and that this is actually you in their website. Now you're almost finished, but I'm going to really highly suggest that you review your student aid report before you sign and submit your FAFSA, because this is going to ensure that the financial aid office receives accurate information, and then they can go ahead and timely process your aid. The student aid report shows every question that you were asked on the FAFSA and your answers to those. So you can make sure that your information is correct. And if you need to go back, you can do that and make any corrections necessary. Then you'll want to sign. The student will sign and one parent will sign the FAFSA using the FSA IDs. Once you do submit your FAFSA, you'll see the FAFSA confirmation page pop up. And this is the only time you're going to see this much detailed information. So I would suggest that you print this confirmation page. Then you can see the next steps you need to take to complete the student financial aid process. You'll see a list of the colleges that will receive your data, and you can review your estimated expected family contribution, and also consider your financial aid estimates. Now, I'm going to emphasize estimates here, because this is not your actual financial aid award. That is going to come from the college financial aid offices themselves. Once your FAFSA is fully processed, it's shared with your colleges, and then they will begin to identify any aid that you might be eligible to receive on their campuses. If your family's financial situation has changed since 2019, and we're going to see a lot of that with everything that's gone on in the year 2020, you'll want to contact your financial aid office, because they have the ability to adjust your aid by using their own professional judgment. Say you have one or perhaps both parents that have been laid off, or there's been a reduction in their hours worked, or you have some unexpected medical expenses that have come up. The financial aid officers will take this into consideration and might be able to offer you additional financial aid, but you are responsible for contacting them about your situation. Your net price is going to be determined by each college by subtracting any grants and scholarships that you're eligible for from your cost of attendance, and that will equal your net price, which can then be paid in cash or by accepting student loans to pay that balance. Your student financial aid offer, which is going to come from every individual campus that you've sent your FAFSA data to, is going to reflect their cost of attendance and any grants, scholarships, work study, and student loans that you've been offered. So read over your offers carefully and respond to any requests so that they can process your aid timely. Now remember, I'll say again, you're going to receive a separate financial aid offer from every college that you've listed on your FAFSA. If you do decide later in the year that you want to apply to a few more schools and you didn't list them on your FAFSA, it's fine to log back in, add the schools, but sign and submit again so that they can receive your information. You'll want to accept your financial aid in this order: scholarships and grants, because this is gift aid that does not have to be repaid. Federal work study next, because you've earned this money and you don't have to pay it back. And then student loans, because this is borrowed money and you have to repay it with interest. I know this is a lot of information to absorb, but Leela does offer a FAFSA completion guide and workbook for the class of 2021, and it's free for Louisiana high school seniors. So if you haven't already received an electronic copy, you can send me an email and I'll be happy to forward the guide on to you, along with Leela's senior checklist that should help you stay on track this year. Now let's just talk for one moment about scholarships. And I know your counselor does this probably weekly. This is gift aid. It does not have to be repaid. Most of it is only available to you to apply for your senior year. So make sure that you are looking for this aid. There are thousands of scholarships offered by schools, your parents, employers, community organizations, and social and religious groups. Some is merit-based, awarded on academic achievement or a special trait or interest that you might have, and others are financial based. So you'll find that a scholarship could cover the entire cost of your tuition, or it could be a one-time award offer. Either way, it's going to reduce the cost of your education. So check with your counselor, contact the college's financial aid office because they see a lot of money coming across their desk and sometimes they have additional tips for you. This year, Leela offers a $1,000 FAFSA completion scholarship. Everyone who completes a FAFSA is eligible to apply, and you can find out the details and the scholarship application form at leela.org. And if you have older siblings that are already in college, they can apply for our $1,000 Choose Louisiana scholarship. Now, for parents and students who need additional funding after they've accepted all of their grants and scholarships and state and federal dollars, we do have a nonprofit education loan program. And you can find out the details about that at leelachoice.org. Your questions are always welcome. So now is the time. If you want to drop something in the Zoom chat box that you want me to address, I'll be happy to do that. In the meantime, while we're waiting, you may want to jot down the FAFSA helpline and my personal email address, and I will check the chat box. Okay, here's a good question. Can you have two children going to college and have each apply for aid in the same year? And absolutely. And the fact that you do have more than one child in college could increase their aid offer. So definitely apply individually for each of your children that are going to be in college this upcoming year. And while we're on that topic, there is a link on that confirmation page that we went over earlier. And this is your only time that you can actually submit one child's FAFSA and then select that link on the confirmation page, and the parent's information is automatically going to be populated into the second child's FAFSA. And that should save you some time as well. Okay, what does a student need to accomplish if the parent is a 90% disabled veteran? There are veterans benefits that are available to students. You will need to contact the Office of Veteran Affairs on each of the college campuses to discuss your veterans benefits for that student. Now, if you are disabled, you will not be earning any working wages, so be sure that you're not accounting for your benefits on the FAFSA. Disability benefits do not have to be reported, only working wages. And if you want to talk to me a little bit more in depth about your situation as a disabled veteran, I'll be happy to talk to you about that. So give me a call or email me and we'll start a discussion. Is the Start Saving 529 plan considered a regular savings account? It is considered an investment account, and you do have to report the balance of that 529 account. Now, if it's in the student's name, then that is going to be income that's going to be reported by the student in the student financial section. Any investments that are in the parent's name with the parent social security number, you'll report those investments in the parent section. But you are more than welcome to call me as you're going through the process, and I'll be happy to help you with that as well. The next question. Are ACT scores entered during the FAFSA process? They are not. The FAFSA is not merit-based. They are not concerned with your GPA or your ACT or any other college admissions test scores. This is strictly financial based. So don't worry about your ACT scores within the FAFSA. What about SSI? That's a good question. Social Security income is not considered a working wage, so you will not report that on the FAFSA. And these are items within the FAFSA itself. If you want to check on some of the hyperlinks that you see in the income section, or if you want to check on those question marks over beside the question itself, you'll get more detail. But we're always here to answer those, as well as federal student aid is. What if one parent is working and the other is SSI? Only report the working parent. That's correct. You do not report Social Security income as a working wage, but you will report the working parent's income. These are some great questions, and I really want to commend you because we don't always get questions of this substance. So anybody else while we're on a roll? Okay. Well, it was my pleasure to be with you this evening. I hope you'll feel free to call me anytime with your questions. And I just want to thank Ms. Waldron, and I hope that you'll thank her, because if you think that submitting your one FAFSA is a big task, imagine that she's responsible for every senior getting their FAFSA submitted. So thank you so much, Ms. Waldron, and thanks for having me. I look forward to receiving all of your FAFSA completion scholarship applications.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
You're very welcome.